Let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly monumental and highly controversial chapter in modern military history. We're digging into the Afghanistan Papers. We're going to explore this massive systemic gap between the optimistic story the public was being told and the classified, frankly chaotic reality actually happening on the ground during the 20-year Afghanistan War. For years, America was told the war in Afghanistan was improving, but secret interviews revealed a very different story. Right there, that single contradiction is the core suspense of what we're looking at today. It's this enormous disconnect between public confidence and private uncertainty that basically defined an entire generation of conflict. So, to really understand this, we need to rewind all the way back to the beginning. The year is 2001. Right after the tragic September 11th attacks, the military campaign in Afghanistan was first launched by the United States. And in the very beginning, the mandate was incredibly clear. It was hyper-specific: destroy al-Qaeda and remove the Taliban government that was harboring them. That was it. And at first, honestly, it looked like a definitive victory. Within just a couple of months, the Taliban collapsed. American forces rapidly gained control of major areas. I mean, if we just hit pause on history right there, it looked like a rapid, absolute success. But instead of ending, the mission slowly morphed into something far, far more complicated. The United States wasn't just fighting terrorist groups anymore. Suddenly, they were trying to do much, much more. We saw this massive mission creep. The strategy shifted from straightforward counterterrorism into this vast, tangled web of objectives. Suddenly, the goals expanded to building a brand new Afghan government from scratch. They were training security forces from the ground up, battling deep-seated corruption, and trying to force long-term stability onto a region that had been fractured by decades of prior conflict. It was a completely different ballgame. So year after year goes by. More soldiers are deployed. Over $2 trillion gets spent. Now, on the surface, military commanders are continually reporting progress. But behind closed doors, as all this complexity just kept spiraling, many officials were looking around and asking themselves this exact critical question. What was the real plan here? Well, years later, after some really intense legal battles and Freedom of Information Act requests, the truth finally spilled out. A vast collection of confidential interviews, what we now call the Afghanistan Papers, exposed a massive systemic failure. And I want to be clear here, these weren't just random opinions. These were the private, completely unvarnished thoughts of military officers, diplomats, and frontline officials who were intimately connected to the day-to-day realities of the war. And the contrast was just jarring. In public, you had officials standing at podiums, repeatedly assuring the American people that progress was being made. They'd cite all these metrics that painted this rosy picture of stability. But in these confidential files, the reality was bleak. Officials openly admitted they were deeply confused about the mission. They cited constantly shifting strategies. Some frankly admitted they didn't even fully understand Afghanistan's economy, or its culture, or the local tribal dynamics to begin with. So the big takeaway from the Afghanistan Papers isn't just one single explosive secret. Rather, they revealed a fundamental, structural inability among leaders to even agree on what victory actually meant, because the answers just kept changing. One day, it's hunting terrorists. The next, it's trying to build a fully functioning democracy with a centralized government. Officials actually struggled to measure if the war was succeeding. I mean, was the goal to wipe out the Taliban or to establish nationwide infrastructure? Lumping all these sprawling objectives together meant every single new strategy seemed to just create a brand new set of problems. And as these strategies floundered at the highest levels of government, we absolutely have to remember the devastating reality on the ground. Tens of thousands of Afghan civilians lost their lives. Thousands of American service members made the ultimate sacrifice, returning home with physical and invisible wounds, all while trying to execute a mission that their very own commanders were privately doubting. This fundamental confusion didn't just last a few months either. It stretched across 4 completely different presidential administrations. From the initial intervention way back in 2001, spanning nearly 2 full decades, all the way to the shocking withdrawal and the rapid collapse of the Afghan government in 2021. 20 years. The war ultimately lasted almost 20 years. That makes it the absolute longest conflict in American history. Just think about that for a second. An entire generation grew up with this war just operating in the background, fueled by shifting goalposts and entirely uncertain definitions of victory. Then came 2021. This sudden, stunning fall of the Afghan government shocked much of the world.
And it forced everyone to look back and ask these incredibly difficult questions about everything that was happening behind the scenes. Could this outcome have been predicted? Did the leaders truly understand just how weak the Afghan government they were trying to build had actually become? And honestly, perhaps most importantly, how long had officials known that this mission was facing such serious, insurmountable problems? While the Afghanistan papers don't give us one simple answer, they absolutely prove that the private doubts existed long, long before the public was ever made aware. Ultimately, this whole story serves as a stark historical warning. It shows us the severe dangers of long wars and the very hard limits of military intervention. Military power is incredibly effective at winning battles, no doubt about it. But building a stable country from scratch, that is a far, far more complicated endeavor, and it's one that simply cannot be solved with sheer force alone.
I want to leave you with this final, powerful question drawn straight from the legacy of those secret interviews. If the people leading the war did not agree on what victory looked like, and if the goals kept constantly changing, how could anyone know when the war was actually over? It's a haunting thought, and for sure, it's one that will define how we study military history for decades to come. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep asking the tough questions.